The relentless Arizona sun, a brazen eye in an azure sky, beat down upon the pristine terracotta-tiled roofs of Sedona Springs estates. This sprawling community, nestled amidst rust-colored mesas, prided itself on its meticulously manicured desert landscaping, a vibrant tapestry of saguaros, ocotillos, and drought-resistant blooms, and its unwavering adherence to a homeowner association covenant thicker than a telephone directory. It was into this seemingly tranquil oasis that Ben and Clara Evans had recently transplanted their lives, hoping for a peaceful environment to welcome their first child. Clara, 7 months pregnant, and radiating a serene glow that defied the burgeoning summer heat, envisioned quiet mornings on their shaded patio, the scent of desert sage in the air. Ben, a search and rescue helicopter pilot for the county sheriff's department, a man accustomed to the high-stakes drama of plucking stranded hikers from sheer cliff faces or navigating treacherous wildfire zones, looked forward to a calm domestic haven. Their new home, a modest but charming Santa Fe-style house on Ocotillo Way, promised just that. Their first few weeks were a whirlwind of unpacking, arranging furniture, and a gradual, often uncomfortable acclimation to the dry desert heat, a significant departure from the temperate coastal climate they had left behind. The neighbors they encountered offered polite, reserved smiles and brief, sun-drenched pleasantries. However, one resident of Sedona Springs Estates seemed to operate on a different, altogether more formidable plane of existence. Her name was Ms. Deirdre McMillan, a woman whose indeterminate advanced age was belied by an iron will, a ramrod posture, and an eagle eye perpetually scanning for any perceived infraction against the HOA's voluminous rulebook. She lived in a larger, impeccably maintained home at the strategic head of their cul-de-sac, its landscaping so unnervingly perfect it looked almost artificial, a still life carved from stone and thorn. Deirdre, or the matriarch of Minutia, as she was less reverently known in hushed tones among more exasperated residents, was the long-standing, seemingly eternal chairwoman of the Architectural Control Committee and a dominant, often intimidating voice on the HOA board. Clara had seen Deirdre on a few occasions, always from a distance. Once Deirdre was meticulously padlocking the gate to the small community playground at midday, despite the sign clearly stating its hours of operation. When a young mother with a toddler had inquired, Deirdre had curtly informed her that the sun was far too intense for delicate young skin at this hour, and that she was merely ensuring child safety. Another time, Jessica had seen Deirdre through her kitchen window, seemingly measuring the distance between her newly planted bougainvillea and the sidewalk with a small, precise-looking device, her lips moving silently as if reciting incantations from the HOA scripture. The Evanses' first formal introduction to Deirdre McMillan occurred not with a welcoming fruit basket, but with a sharply worded triplicates notice left pinned to their front door with an almost aggressive neatness. It detailed with almost microscopic precision 3 alleged violations their garden hose was coiled in a manner not consistent with the approved concentric circle method outlined in Appendix D, Section 2, Paragraph A of the Landscaping Guidelines. A single nearly invisible sprout of what Deirdre identified as Tribulus terrestris, puncture vine, had dared to emerge near their walkway, Class C noxious weed infraction, and the welcome mat Clara had chosen. A cheerful item with a whimsical roadrunner motif was deemed not in keeping with the subdued and earth-toned aesthetic mandated for entryway accoutrements. Ben, returning from a grueling 24-hour shift involving a complex nighttime mountain rescue, found Clara staring at the notice, a bewildered frown etching itself between her brows. "Is she serious?" Clara asked, handing him the official-looking document. A concentric circle method for coiling a hose. And I thought the Roadrunner mat was charmingly local. Ben scanned the list, a muscle beginning to twitch almost imperceptibly in his jaw. Welcome to the neighborhood, I guess. He carefully folded the notice, resisting the urge to crumple it. I'll recoil the hose to her exacting specifications, excavate the offending weed as if it were an unexploded ordnance, and we can find a suitably anodyne welcome mat. Let's not start a war before we've even properly unpacked. Clara sighed, her hand resting protectively on her burgeoning belly. I just want to focus on getting the nursery ready, Ben. Not worry about hose protocol and weed classifications. Their attempt to appease Deirdre by promptly and meticulously addressing the listed infractions proved not just futile, but seemingly counterproductive. It was as if their compliance only emboldened her, confirming her authority and sharpening her focus. In the following weeks, a steady, oppressive drizzle of notifications emails, often CC'd to the entire HOA board, and occasionally direct unannounced courtesy visits from Deirdre herself, became a regular unwelcome feature of their lives. She complained that the shade of adobe beige they'd painted their backyard fence, a color chosen directly from the HOA's pre-approved palette, cross-referenced and double-checked, was upon closer inspection by her discerning eye under variable afternoon light conditions, actually a quarter tone too warm and exhibiting an unacceptable level of gloss, potentially causing reflective glare onto adjacent properties. She critiqued the placement of their patio furniture creates a cluttered visual line from the street and impedes the natural flow of desert breezes as stipulated in the community's feng shui addendum, an often overlooked but vital component of aesthetic harmony. The frequency of their lawn, watering a tiny patch of drought-tolerant grass they were struggling to establish, was first too often, then, after they adjusted, not often enough. Even their wind chimes, a delicate set of bamboo tubes that produced a barely audible, soothing whisper, were cited as a sonic nuisance potentially disruptive to neighbors with acute auditory sensitivities. Her focus, however, soon narrowed, with an unnerving, almost obsessive intensity onto Clara and her pregnancy. Deirdre, who, as they later learned from a more forthcoming neighbor, George Peterson, had tragically lost her only grandchild, a toddler accidentally left in a sweltering car by a distraught babysitter years ago, seemed to view Clara's impending motherhood not as a joyous event, but as a future source of neighborhood chaos, and perhaps a painful reminder. Her interactions regarding the baby were often couched in terms of safety and preparedness, but carried an undercurrent of invasive judgment. Mrs. Evans Deirdre said one afternoon, materializing silently beside Clara as she was taking a short, slow walk around the block, trying to combat the persistent leg cramps of late pregnancy. Deirdre had been lurking near her prize-winning thornless rose bushes, secateurs glinting in her hand. While I understand the nesting instinct is strong in your current condition, I must remind you that any exterior modifications for, shall we say, juvenile accommodation, play structures, sandboxes, brightly colored recreational items, require extensive pre-approval from the Architectural Control Committee, including environmental impact studies on visual pollution. We strive to maintain a sophisticated and adult-oriented ambiance in Sedona Springs. Clara, taken aback by the formality, and the chillingly detached phrasing, could only murmur, "We haven't even thought about sandboxes yet, Ms. McMillan." "Forethought is a virtue," Mrs. Evans Deirdre had replied, her gaze lingering on Clara's swollen abdomen, with an expression that was difficult to decipher. Perhaps a flicker of ancient pain, quickly masked by a severe, almost predatory scrutiny. Just as forethought should be given to the potential for infantile vocalizations to disturb the peace and tranquility our residents pay a considerable premium for. The bylaws regarding noise abatement, particularly during designated siesta hours, are quite stringent and rigorously enforced. She then offered Clara a thin, brittle smile and a pamphlet titled Community Harmony, a Guide to Considerate Cohabitation. Ben. When Clara recounted these increasingly unsettling interactions, felt his anger simmering a slow burn beneath his usually calm exterior. He was a man trained to handle confrontation, to de-escalate volatile situations with calm authority. But Deirdre Macmillan's brand of insidious, rule-cloaked hostility, her ability to weaponize bylaws and twist concern into control, was a new, infuriating challenge. He attempted to speak with her directly, hoping to appeal to some vestige of reason or common decency. He found her one morning meticulously adjusting a solar-powered sensor on the wall of the community's rarely used windowless equipment storage, shed located at the far end of a service road. She was making notes on a clipboard. Ms. Macmillan Ben began keeping his tone polite but firm, a tone he used when addressing potentially uncooperative individuals in high-stress rescue situations. "My wife and I are doing our utmost to be good neighbors and adhere to the HOA rules. We respect the need for community standards. However, some of your recent comments, particularly regarding my wife's pregnancy and our future child, have been inappropriate and deeply upsetting to her." Deirdre lowered her clipboard slowly and fixed Ben with an icy, unblinking stare. "Mr. Evans, my comments are never inappropriate. They are observations rooted in the covenant's conditions and restrictions, the CC&Rs, that you contractually agreed to abide by when you purchased your property in this exclusive community. It is my fiduciary duty, indeed, my moral obligation as a board member and chair of the ACC to ensure all residents are fully cognizant of their obligations and the potential impact of their choices on the collective. If your wife finds factual reminders upsetting, that is a personal sensitivity for her to address, not a reflection on my diligent conduct." "This isn't about factual reminders," Ms. Macmillan Ben countered his patience, wearing perilously thin. "This is about a pattern of harassment. You're making my pregnant wife feel unwelcome, anxious, and targeted in her own home." Deirdre sniffed dismissively, a small, sharp sound of contempt. "Anxiety, Mr. Evans, is often a symptom of an unwillingness to conform to established norms, a resistance to harmonious integration. Perhaps if you and your wife focused more on seamless assimilation and less on cultivating a sense of perceived victimhood, your experience in Sedona Springs would be more placid." She then turned back to her sensor adjustments, effectively terminating the conversation. "I'm merely ensuring the temperature and humidity controls for this storage unit are optimal. Sensitive equipment, you understand." Ben walked away, clenching his fists, the image of her coolly adjusting a sensor on a hot, windowless shed disturbingly out of place. The woman was an impregnable fortress of self-righteousness, her grief seemingly twisted into a rigid, unyielding weapon. The Arizona summer intensified the heat, becoming a relentless, oppressive blanket smothering Sedona Springs. Temperatures regularly soared above 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and the sun beat down with a brutal, almost personal intensity. Clara, now deep into her 8th month, found the heat increasingly debilitating. She spent most of her days indoors in the cool sanctuary of their air-conditioned home, venturing out only when absolutely necessary, her movements becoming slower, more deliberate. One sweltering Thursday, Clara had a crucial prenatal appointment with a specialist in Flagstaff, a good hour's scenic but potentially arduous drive away. Ben was on a mandatory multi-day training exercise for a new night vision hoist system and advanced desert survival techniques deep out of cell range in a remote mountainous area of the Tonto National Forest. Clara had initially asked her friend Sarah, who lived in a neighboring town, to drive her. Sarah's car, however, had developed a last-minute uncooperative air conditioning system, a death knell in Arizona summer. Reluctantly, Clara decided to drive herself. Her own SUV was reliable, its AC robust, and she planned to leave very early in the morning to avoid the worst of the midday heat on her return journey. The appointment went well, the specialist reassuring her that despite the challenging pregnancy and the oppressive heat, both she and the baby were remarkably doing fine. Feeling a wave of immense relief, Clara began the drive back to Sedona Springs around noon. The heat was already shimmering off the highway asphalt in dizzying, mirage-like waves. She was looking forward to getting home to the coolness of her house, to a long, restorative nap. As she pulled into the Sedona Springs Estates entrance, she noticed Deirdre McMillan's car parked near the community mail kiosk. Deirdre herself was not visible. Clara just wanted to get home, but a small nagging thought reminded her she needed to pick up a package slip from their mailbox for a baby monitor they'd ordered. With a sigh, she pulled her SUV into one of the designated short-term parking spots near the kiosk. The area was deserted, most sensible residents ensconced in their air-conditioned homes during this, the hottest part of the day. Clara left her engine and air conditioning running, grabbed her purse, and walked towards her mailbox, her movements slow and labored in the oppressive heat. She retrieved her package slip. As she turned back towards her car, Deirdre McMillan emerged from the direction of the community storage shed, carrying a small, official-looking box. "Ah, Mrs. Evans." Deirdre called out her voice, surprisingly amiable, almost friendly. "Just the person. I have a revised copy of the Emergency Preparedness and Child Safety Addendum for you. The board just approved it. Vital information, especially with, well, your impending arrival." She gestured towards the nearby storage shed. "I was just dropping off some archived files. Perhaps we could step into the shed office for a moment. It's out of this dreadful sun, and I can quickly highlight the key changes for you. It won't take but a minute." Clara hesitated. The thought of any enclosed space, even an office, felt stifling. But Deirdre's tone was uncharacteristically conciliatory, and the shed, while likely still warm, would at least offer shade. "All right, Ms. McMillan, but just for a moment. I'm quite tired." "Of course, my dear. Just a formality." Deirdre led the way to the heavy, insulated door of the storage shed. It opened into a small, cluttered anteroom that indeed felt slightly cooler than the inferno outside, though still stuffy. There was a metal desk and a chair. "Do take a seat, Mrs. Evans. You look flushed." Clara gratefully sank into the chair. Deirdre placed the box on the desk, then said, "Oh, drat, I seem to have left the actual signature page in my car. And your vehicle, it's still running, isn't it? Such a waste of fuel in this heat. Do you mind if I just switch it off for you while I retrieve the document, and I'll grab your phone from your car too so you don't have to carry it?" "Keys." Slightly flustered and eager to get this over with, Clara handed over her keys. "My phone is on the passenger seat." "Excellent. Be right back." Deirdre stepped out, closing the anteroom door. Clara heard the distinct sound of her SUV engine being switched off. A moment later, Deirdre returned, holding Clara's phone. "Here we are." She placed the phone on the desk, then rummaged in the box. "Now, about these revisions." She spoke for a few minutes, her voice a low drone about fire extinguisher placements and emergency contact lists. The air in the small room was growing noticeably warmer, stuffier. Clara felt a wave of dizziness. "Ms. McMillan, I really need to go. I'm not feeling well." "Of course, dear. Just one more thing." Deirdre smiled a strange, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She picked up Clara's phone. "You know these devices can be such a distraction, and in an emergency one needs to focus." With a swift movement, she opened a small, heavy-duty Pelican case. From the box, dropped Clara's phone inside and snapped it shut with a decisive click. "There, safe and sound." "What are you doing?" Clara asked, a tendril of alarm snaking through her heat-induced fog. "Just ensuring your undivided attention, Mrs. Evans," Deirdre said, her voice, now losing its feigned warmth, becoming as brittle as desert brush, "and ensuring you have ample time to reflect on the importance of rules of order, of respecting those who dedicate their lives to maintaining standards." She stepped back towards the door leading outside. "Ms. McMillan." This isn't funny. Give me my phone. I need to leave. Clara tried to stand, but a wave of nausea hit her. Deirdre's hand was on the doorknob. Oh, I think a period of quiet contemplation is precisely what you need, in a controlled environment. It's quite hot today, isn't it? Enclosed spaces can become like ovens. A valuable lesson in cause and effect, especially for expectant mothers who might be careless. Her eyes, cold and hard as obsidian, met Clara's. My granddaughter, she learned that lesson the hard way because of carelessness. Panic, stark and electrifying, seized Clara. She lunged for the door, but Deirdre was quicker. She slipped out, and Clara heard the heavy thud of an exterior bolt sliding into place, followed by the distinct click of a padlock. Clara threw herself against the door, rattling the handle, screaming, "Ms. Macmillan, let me out, Deirdre, please." Only silence answered, thick and suffocating as the rapidly increasing heat in the windowless, poorly ventilated shed. She was trapped. Her phone was locked away, and she was alone with the desert sun turning her prison into a furnace. The first sharp pain of an unexpected contraction ripped through her. Ben, miles away, was overseeing a simulated night hoist from a treacherous cliff face when an inexplicable, bone-deep sense of dread washed over him. It was so powerful, so visceral, that he momentarily lost focus, his hand faltering on the controls. His radio crackled, a routine check-in from base. He responded automatically, but his mind was suddenly filled with an image of Clara, her face pale, her eyes wide with a fear that mirrored his own. It was more than just a fleeting worry. It was a profound, gut-wrenching conviction that something was terribly, catastrophically wrong. The exercise concluded an hour later. The moment he was within intermittent crackling cell range, Ben tried Clara's phone. It went straight to voicemail, the mailbox full. His blood ran cold. Clara never let her voicemail fill up. He tried again and again, the same result. Panic, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, pierced through his professional composure. He immediately contacted his squadron's base, requesting they try to reach Clara through their home landline to send a patrol car to their address for a welfare check, anything. He explained his growing alarm, the unresponsive cell phone. As he was conveying this, a priority dispatch came through on the county emergency channels, patched to his training frequency, due to its unusual nature and the developing weather situation. All units be advised, possible situation at Sedona Springs Estates. Elderly resident George Peterson reports concerns about a pregnant female, Clara Evans, possibly missing or in distress. He states she was last seen with HOA President Deirdre Macmillan near the community storage shed. Also be advised, a significant dust storm, a hayboob, is rapidly approaching the area from the southwest. Visibility will be severely impacted. Ground units are being dispatched ETA variable due to deteriorating conditions. Ben's heart stopped. Sedona Springs, storage shed, Clara, Deirdre. The haboob. It was a confluence of nightmares. "Command, this is Captain Evans." Ben's voice was tight, urgent broadcasting over the training net that was now directly linked to emergency dispatch. "That is my wife. My address? I am approximately 5 flight minutes from that location in rescue chopper. 7, requesting immediate diversion and authorization to respond. Code 3, I have a full medical and rescue crew on board. Rescue 7 authorization granted." The reply was instantaneous. "Proceed with extreme caution. The dust wall is imminent. Ground units are struggling to make headway." Ben didn't need to be told twice. He barked orders to his co-pilot and crew. The powerful Sikorsky HH-60, Pave Hawk, moments before a training vehicle, became a chariot of desperate hope. He pushed the helicopter to its limits, his mind a maelstrom of terror and calculations. The approaching dust storm would make pinpointing the shed, let alone landing or hoisting, incredibly dangerous. As they neared Sedona Springs, the leading edge of the colossal, ochre-colored dust wall was visible on the horizon, an apocalyptic curtain descending upon the landscape. Ben scanned the ground, his experienced eyes quickly locating the service road leading to the storage shed. He saw movement. George Peterson, the elderly neighbor, was frantically trying to pry open the shed door with a crowbar. And then he saw her. Deirdre McMillan. She was standing a short distance away, not helping, but seemingly arguing with George, gesturing angrily towards the shed, then towards the approaching dust storm, as if trying to dissuade him. That woman. Ben's voice, amplified by the helicopter's powerful external address system, boomed down from the sky, momentarily startling Deirdre and George. Deirdre McMillan. Step away from that structure and the individual attempting to render aid. This is the sheriff's department. All civilians clear the immediate area. Deirdre looked up, her face a mask of stunned disbelief as the large rescue helicopter descended through the increasingly hazy air, its rotor wash flattening the perfectly manicured desert plants nearby and whipping her silver hair into a frenzy. The first gusts of wind from the approaching haboob began to buffet the aircraft. Ben brought the chopper to a low, precarious hover, a safe distance from the shed, the dust stinging his eyes even through the cockpit glass. His hoist operator and primary medic, Master Sergeant Kelly Ace Ventura, a man whose calm Ben had relied on in countless life-or-death situations, was already at the door, ready for a fast rope insertion. Ace, get that door open. Get her out. Possible heat stroke. Probable early labor. She's pregnant. Ben's commands were clipped, professional, but his voice was raw, with barely suppressed emotion. He watched his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird as Ace rappelled swiftly to the ground and sprinted towards the shed carrying a specialized forcible entry toolkit. George Peterson, seeing Ace, stumbled back, nearly overcome by the wind and dust, but pointed frantically at the door. He appeared to have injured his arm in his attempts to pry it open. Deirdre McMillan, however, began to shriek, her voice thin and lost against the rising howl of the wind and the thundering rotors. This is private property. You have no right. This is an unauthorized landing. I am the HOA president. She was violating protocol. Ace ignored her. He reached the shed door, took one look at the heavy padlock and the bolted exterior, and without hesitation selected a Halligan bar from his kit. With two powerful, expertly placed strikes, the padlock shattered. He threw the bolt. The door creaked open. The blast of superheated, stagnant air that billowed out was almost visible. Clara was slumped on the floor, semi-conscious, drenched in sweat, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. Her eyes fluttered open at the sudden influx of dusty but cooler air. "Ben," she whispered, as Ace gently scooped her up. "Clara's out. She's responsive, barely severe heat exposure, definite contractions." Ace's voice crackled over the comms. Ben, watching from the cockpit as the dust storm began to engulf them, felt a dizzying wave of relief, mixed with undiluted fury. His crew, a well-oiled machine, swung into action on the ground. Ace and the flight medic immediately began aggressive cooling measures using cooled saline IVs and ice packs from their advanced medical kit while assessing her contractions. Every second was critical. Visibility was dropping to near zero. The first sheriff's patrol car lights, barely penetrating the swirling dust, finally managed to navigate to the scene, followed closely by an ambulance whose siren was a muted wail in the roaring wind. Deputies, their faces masked against the dust, rushed towards the shed. Ben's voice, hard as desert iron, came over the PA, again directed at the approaching deputies. "That woman, Deirdre McMillan. She locked my wife in that shed. She stole her phone. She is responsible for this. Arrest her for attempted murder." Deirdre, seeing the deputies advancing through the maelstrom, her carefully constructed world literally dissolving around her in a cloud of dust and recrimination, her face contorted with rage, and a dawning, desperate fear began to scream incoherently about rules, about disrespect, about her authority, about the dangers of carelessness. Her protests were cut short as two deputies battling the wind took firm hold of her arms. "Bontu." McMillan, one of the deputies, yelled over the storm, his voice grim. "You're under arrest! Arrest! How dare you! I am a pillar of this community. This is an outrage. I demand—" The click of handcuffs, almost lost in the wind, was her only answer. George Peterson, clutching his injured arm, provided a breathless, furious account of Deirdre's interference. Clara was being stabilized. The on-site medical intervention by Ben's highly trained crew had been crucial. The paramedics, working in concert with Ace and the flight medic in the howling wind, prepared her for immediate transport. Given the severity of her condition, the premature labor, and the near-impossible conditions for ground transport, the decision was made to airlift her directly to the trauma center in Phoenix, a perilous flight through the retreating but still turbulent storm. Ben landed the Pavehawk with extraordinary skill in a tiny, momentarily sheltered clearing. His co-pilot took the controls. Ben was out of his seat and sprinting towards Clara before the rotors had even fully spooled down the dust tearing at him. He reached her side as they were loading her onto a specialized flight litter to be hoisted into the helicopter. "Clara, Clara, can you hear me, baby?" He gripped her hand. It was still frighteningly hot to the touch, but her eyelids fluttered. A pain-filled moan escaped her lips. "The baby, coming." She whispered, her voice a faint, dry rasp. "They're both going to be okay, sweetheart?" Ben choked out, his own eyes burning from dust and unshed tears. "I've got you. We've got you." The flight to Phoenix was a turbulent, terrifying ordeal. Ben stayed by Clara's side in the noisy, vibrating cabin, watching his crew work with incredible skill and compassion, never leaving her hand, murmuring words of love and reassurance as Clara's labor progressed with alarming speed. At the trauma center, a waiting army of medical professionals whisked Clara away to an emergency delivery room. Ben was left in a sterile, silent waiting room, the adrenaline finally ebbing, leaving him shaking hollow with fear and caked in desert dust. Hours crawled by each minute, an agony of uncertainty. Finally, a doctor, her face kind but etched with fatigue, approached him. "Mr. Evans, I'm Dr. Ramirez, the attending obstetrician." Ben leaped to his feet. "My wife, my baby Clara, suffered severe heat-stroke dehydration and a placental abruption due to the trauma and stress," Dr. Ramirez said gravely. "It was incredibly close, Mr. Evans. Her core temperature was critically high. We've stabilized her, but she required an emergency cesarean section. She's currently in recovery, and it will be a long road. She's very weak, but she's a fighter." She paused. "The baby, your son, Mr. Evans. He was born very prematurely under extreme distress. He's in the neonatal intensive care unit. He's critical, but he's also a fighter. We're doing everything we can." A son. Clara was alive. Their son was alive but fragile. Ben sank back into his chair, overwhelmed by a tidal wave of emotions. Relief so profound it was painful terror for his son, gratitude for the skill of his crew and the hospital staff, and a burning, unquenchable anger towards the woman who had meticulously, callously orchestrated this. The investigation into Deirdre McMillan's actions revealed the chilling depths of her malice and her distorted grief. George Peterson's eyewitness account of her trapping Clara and then trying to prevent his intervention even as the haboob bore down was damning. Security footage from a motion-activated camera George had installed overlooking the service road after a spate of minor vandalism to community property captured Deirdre luring Clara to the shed, Deirdre exiting alone and the heavy bolt sliding into place. It also captured her later confrontation with George. Deirdre's initial statements to detectives were a bizarre tapestry of denial, self-justification, and pronouncements about the importance of HOA rules and teaching lessons about responsibility. She claimed Clara had willingly entered the shed to discuss important HOA safety matters, and that the door must have accidentally locked due to the wind. She insisted she had forgotten Clara was in there when the dust storm hit. The evidence, however, pointed to a far more sinister, premeditated intent. The Pelican case with Clara's phone was found in Deirdre's car. Her computer history showed recent searches for effects of extreme heat on pregnant women, car interior temperatures Arizona summer, and legal liability non-maintained community structures. Her colleagues on the HOA board, when interviewed, painted a picture of a woman increasingly unhinged by her grief, obsessed with control, prone to vindictive actions against anyone who crossed her or questioned her authority. They admitted shamefacedly that they had often been too intimidated to challenge her, and that her rhetoric about safety had become increasingly extreme after her granddaughter's death. Deirdre McMillan was charged with a litany of felonies, including kidnapping, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, the shed, in the context of extreme heat, and Clara's condition and attempted murder. Given the particular cruelty, the targeting of a vulnerable pregnant woman, and the clear evidence of premeditation, the prosecutor announced his intention to seek the maximum possible penalties. Bail was denied. Her reign of terror in Sedona Springs Estates was definitively irrevocably over. Clara's recovery was slow and arduous. The physical toll was immense, but the emotional trauma, the recurring nightmares of being trapped of the suffocating heat, were profound. She suffered from severe PTSD. Their son, whom they named Ethan, meaning strong, enduring, spent 3 terrifying months in the NICU, fighting for every breath, overcoming one crisis after another. Ben and Clara, though exhausted and emotionally battered, found an incredible, almost superhuman strength in their love for each other and for their tiny, resilient son. The Sedona Springs community, shocked to its core, rallied around them in unexpected ways. George Peterson organized a fundraiser. New younger HOA board members, horrified by what had transpired under Deirdre's watch, initiated a complete overhaul of the CC&Rs, focusing on compassion and genuine community well-being rather than punitive control. They established a Clara and Ethan Fund and planted a grove of desert willows near the now permanently decommissioned and demolished storage shed, a living memorial to resilience. Deirdre McMillan's trial was a somber, sobering affair. Her defense attorney attempted to portray her as a grieving grandmother broken by tragedy, whose obsessive desire to prevent further harm had tragically unintentionally gone awry. A misguided attempt to protect. But the prosecution, armed with the chilling evidence of her internet searches, her deliberate actions, her callous disregard for Clara's life, even as the haboob approached, and the devastating medical testimony about Clara's and Ethan's near-fatal ordeal, painted a clear picture of a cruel, calculating woman who had deliberately and maliciously orchestrated a near-fatal attack, using her grief as a perverse justification for her monstrous actions. During the sentencing phase, after being found guilty on all counts, Deirdre was allowed to make a statement. For a moment, the iron mask seemed to crack. Her voice, frail and trembling, spoke of her granddaughter, of the unbearable heat of the carelessness that had stolen her. I didn't want anyone else to suffer like that, to be so unprepared. It was a flicker, perhaps, of the broken woman beneath the monstrous facade. But it was too little too late, offering no solace, only a glimpse into the distorted labyrinth of her mind. The judge, while acknowledging her past tragedy, condemned her actions as a calculated act of profound cruelty, a terrifying abuse of power born from unresolved grief that twisted into a desire to inflict suffering under the guise of order. Deirdre McMillan was sentenced to 30 years to life in state prison. Her meticulously maintained home in Sedona Springs was eventually sold, the proceeds contributing to the civil judgment awarded to the Evans family. Ben, Clara, and baby Ethan never returned to Ocotillo Way. The desert, once a symbol of peace, now held too many toxic memories, the sun a reminder not of warmth, but of a suffocating inferno. They relocated to a quiet coastal town in a cooler, greener state, far from the oppressive heat, and the even more oppressive reach of HOAs, like the one that had nearly destroyed them. Ben eventually returned to his work as a search and rescue pilot, his commitment to saving lives now imbued with an even deeper, more visceral personal understanding of what it meant to be on the brink of the fragility of life. Clara, with therapy and the unwavering support of her husband, slowly began to heal, finding solace and strength in motherhood. Ethan, though he would carry some minor lifelong health challenges from his traumatic birth, thrived. A happy, resilient boy, a testament to his name. The story of Deirdre McMillan, the HOA matriarch of Sedona Springs, became a dark legend in the community, a chilling reminder of how unchecked power, unaddressed grief, and a narcissistic obsession with control can fester beneath a veneer of civic duty, blooming into unimaginable cruelty. Her carefully constructed world of rules and regulations had crumbled, leaving behind only the ruin of her own life and the indelible scars on the family she had tried so viciously to harm. But the Evans family, though scarred, had survived their love for each other, a testament to a strength far greater than any HOA bylaw or any act of malice. They had found their peace not in the artificial, sterile order of a gated community, but in the resilient, unbreakable, sometimes messy bonds of family and the quiet courage of everyday survival. And in Sedona Springs, the desert willows by the vanished shed grew their leaves, whispering a story of loss, but also of a community slowly, painfully learning to choose compassion over control.